What interests and motivate the actors behind each event? The board is deployed there. Critical move. Investigates every event from Monday to Friday. Only on TeleSUR.
In a world infested by inequalities, abuse of power, and injustice, the American journalist Abby Martin covers the struggle for fundamental rights worldwide, deepening into the search of files which uncover the empire's strategies through our screen and web platform in English. The Empire Files with Abby Martin. Tuesday, only on TeleSUR.
We share your feelings, exalt your accomplishments, and show your reality. Our approach is global and keeps us in tune with the peoples. Caribbean countries also get our signal. With enthusiasm, we will continue to broadcast for them. Because we are TeleSUR, the news broadcaster from South America and the Caribbean. TeleSUR English presents a weekly program to discuss the political, economic and social issues affecting the Caribbean community. We'll challenge stereotypes and unpack the diversity of the region through the analysis of unique cultures, religions and art. We Caribbean. Wednesdays, only on TeleSUR.
Welcome to Interviews from Mexico. I'm Laura Carlson, and I'll be your host as we look at cutting-edge issues with the men and women who know them best. Here on TeleSUR.
Pasarán más de 1000 años, muchos más. Yo no sé si tenga amor la eternidad, pero allá tal como aquí, en la boca llevarás sabor a mí.
This year, 2018, marks 100 years since the birth and 50 years since the death of Alvaro Carrillo, one of Mexico's greatest composers. The name Alvaro Carrillo may not be very well known, but his songs certainly are. They've been translated into languages around the world and have delighted millions. To talk about Alvaro Carrillo and his career, we're very fortunate to have here in the studio Mario Carrillo. Mario, thanks so much for being with us here on Interviews from Mexico.
Thank you, Laura. I'm very glad to be here to talk about my passion is Alvaro Carrillo.
Mario is also a singer and a composer, and he's been dedicated to preserving his father's legacy. Mario, tell us how your father got started in music and became the great legend that he now is in Mexican music.
Okay, first, he was born in a very, very small place that called Costa Chica. Costa Chica in Oaxaca. In Oaxaca is a place that is very particular because it's a place where the African Mexican lived there. My father is this kind of people, but he started with the studies in the primary studies, secondary, and the studies. My father was a great student, very, very great students, and all the professors that he had promoted to him to go out to the Costa Chica, because Costa Chica is very, very close there.
And at the time, it must not have been very common for students, for young people in this little village in the southern state of Oaxaca to leave to pursue an education, right?
Yeah, that's right. And another thing that my father was lost his parents when he was 8 years old, and that is very, very uncommon, that the people there with no fathers with no parents, sorry, with no parents, go out there. No? The most of them, they get started.
What did he study in Mexico City, and how did he end up in music?
First, went to Yotzinapan. My father studied in Yotzinapan, and then
Ayotzinapa, which has become famous with the disappearance of the 43 students.
And they
a
love
rural
it.
teaching college.
The student of Yotzinapan love him,
Huh.
really love him. He's an idol there. And then
To this day.
Yeah. Now it's and then he went to Chapingo. Chapingo is for agronomists, engineer for agronomists, and I guess when he studied in Chapingo, he started to be a real composer. There in Chapingo is the most important moment to him in his career of composer, because all the most of his songs, the most important songs, were created there in Chapingo.
As a very young man.
Yeah, maybe he's around 27, 29 when he started there.
And after that, then, did he go back to Oaxaca and continue to compose there, or travel?
No, I guess he is very, when his personality is he always wants to finish all that he started, no? And when he get inside to Chapingo, I guess he didn't imagine that he was a great composer. No pasaba en eso.
It was like a hobby to him
Yeah,
at the time.
I guess that. Around 40 years old, he started to be a composer, professional composer.
And he began to collect some of those old songs from his youth as well. Well, your family has said that this is a very important year because of the birth and the death that took place, an untimely death in an accident, as I understand, and that in some ways it's the death that you're commemorating because it's the moment in which Álvaro Carrillo transcended and became a legend. How do you explain the fact that 50 years later his music still has such an impact on Mexican culture?
Well, I guess two things. The most important, he's a melodist. Yes, all his melodies is very contagious. You know,
they're very
Sabor a mí,
singable.
Or the Yellow Days or La Mentira, what we call that, is so the melodies of Álvaro Carrillo is very, very important in his life. And on the other hand, the lyrics of Álvaro Carrillo. The lyrics is very exceptional man, because the study that he had provoked him to domine the language. So I guess the poetry of Álvaro Carrillo is very, very important for the Mexican people, and the people who know Spanish is the very uncommon letters now.
Well, let's talk about the lyrics, because they're remarkable for the time and even for now. In addition to the verse, they're beautiful verses and they're very well crafted verses, actually what they say, the content is extraordinary. And one of the reasons is because at a time when writers of popular songs were mostly talking about women in stereotype versions of romance and betrayal,
too aggressive.
he had a much more human portrayal of relationships and of women themselves. Do you agree with that, and how would you explain it?
Yes. Well, I guess that Álvaro Carrillo could be an example today, because all the music is very aggressive now, very, very aggressive.
Yeah, a lot of
and Álvaro Carrillo could be an example to the another composers to be more kind, and because the music could be kind, I guess that. No.
Kinder?
Yeah, kinder, very kinder. Now is but the others kind not too aggressive, machism. I know that Álvaro Carrillo is not there.
Well, it's certainly refreshing, and to see also that it still reaches young people today. There's a Korean pop group, very popular,
Yeah,
that recently recorded it. EXO.
EXO K, I think this is. I'm very proud about that. No, Álvaro Carrillo had 50 years that he didn't compose nothing, and still be in these people. No,
Yeah.
Very uncommon in Mexico and the world. No, 50 years with
For the music to live on.
Yeah, it's very.
Yeah, well, that certainly says a lot about the quality and the appeal of that music. The most famous song around the world is, without a doubt, Sabor a Mí.
Sabor a Mí and La Mentira, or Yellow Days.
The line.
Is because I guess because the royalties say that is Sabor a Mí and Yellow Days.
That have been the most covered in all languages and translated.
I guess that Yellow Days is very popular in the English language. I guess it's because the melody. I don't know why, but we receive more royalties from the other countries by Yellow Days, and Sabor a Mí is maybe more Latin.
Oh, yeah. Well, tell us a story, because it's a wonderful story, of how Sabor a Mí came to be written.
Yeah, my mother and my father met in 1957 in the first holidays in December. My mom doesn't drink nothing, didn't drink nothing, and my father drink a lot. So when my father was drink whiskey, take a little drink of whiskey and gave a kiss. Drink of whiskey, gave a kiss. And my mom said, "Hey, Álvaro, don't drink a lot, please." No. And in the other hand, my father doesn't import that. And when my mom still have a kiss with the
with the whiskey breath.
Yeah, said, "Oh, Álvaro, I'm drunk now, and I don't drink a lot." And my mother said, "Yeah, I got a whiskey in my lips," and my father said, "No, you got the taste of me." I got that taste of whiskey, and no, you got the taste of me.
And they knew they had a song.
Yeah, and my mother was a poetry, so she wrote the phrase
in the middle of the party.
Yeah, and this is your homework. You got to do a song of that words. And Sabor a Mí was successful, no? Very successful. But I guess Yellow Days is very successful too.
A lot of beautiful songs. Another characteristic of Álvaro Carrillo, in addition to the music, is the fact that he came out of this small community, an Afro-Mexican community, at a time when the Afro-Mexican population was practically invisible. It's only been really recently here in Mexico that they've been recognized as an indigenous population. Do you think that he encountered discrimination as a result of that? What did that mean to the music in his career?
I guess yes, because my father imagined in the televisions doesn't exist, and like as Agustín Lara, José Alfredo Jiménez, all the composers that you know always stay in the television, but my father no. I don't know why, but I suppose that a little bit some kinds of racism.
Did he himself consider it an important aspect of his identity or of his work?
I don't know. I would like to to talk about my father now, in this moment, like an Afro-Mexican, yes, but I would like to talk about him with a negro. No, because the negro in the Costa Chica is very different than the common of the world. It's very love, sweet. Most of people call me now negro, but negrito, come here. It's very. I guess if I
it's
put
a term of endearment.
yeah, I would like to put there my father because we are in a very important moment in Mexico. Now it's very important, and I would like to put my father there by the example to show if exists discrimination. Don't care about that. You can go and reach your goals. Álvaro Carrillo reached his goals.
A national hero, really, in many ways.
You can do it. This is the part that I would like to put in the important way now.
It could be very inspiring to young people.
Yeah, I guess
from
yes.
A place like San Juan, Cacahuete.
And they need it. The young people need an imagine like Álvaro Carrillo. I guess that, because if you love Álvaro Carrillo, you can love your grandpa, you can love your mom, you can know the other people that you can reach these goals, like many people. No? It's
another characteristic of the music too, that it crosses generations.
And the young people love his music. He doesn't care how he's liked, no? I guess that.
He doesn't care how popular he is?
Yeah, no. And my father got another characteristic. His measure is not about his money or economical rich, no. His measure is about the transcendental was his music, and I know that. The most people now measure your imagine your success about money. You get money, you are very important, and if you don't have money, you are a loser. No, Álvaro Carrillo is the other hand, not get money, but he's a very successful people. I would like to explore that.
And he unfortunately was killed in an accident at the age of 50. By that time, was there recognition of his music, of what a mark it would make on Mexican culture?
No, there's no recognition. Sabor a Mi get inside to the Hall of Fame of Grammy by Javier Solís. Inducted by Javier Solís, not by Álvaro Carrillo. He got no prize, nothing. But this is I like that because Álvaro Carrillo is very mystical about that.
Well, he certainly left a great gift to all of us, whether it was recognized in his lifetime or not. Quickly, we're coming to the end of the show, unfortunately, but tell us about the activities you have planned.
Well, we have 4 activities important. One is a caravan. We have with Martirio, musical caravans, with Martirio, Yoshiro Hiroshi from Japan, and Las Hermanas Garcia from La Costa Chica and Ometepec, Guerrero, and Chogo Prudente. This is the first activity in March and April. The other one is I got a book, biographic book with the songs and the story of the songs teach about Álvaro Carrillo. The other one is a documentary by one director, young director, Juan Carlos Landa. I guess it's very uncommon documentary because was searching Álvaro Carrillo because we don't know what happened with the documental now. We are going to Ayotzinapa, to Chapingo, who knows the people's, interview the people who knew him. And finally, the the event that we are start in the January 50, who calls 100 homage for a centenary.
Oh,
For
great.
a century.
For a century.
For a century,
since
sorry.
his birth. Great. Well, it's been a real pleasure speaking to you. Thank
No,
you so
thank
much for
you.
being here. But I'm sure by now the audience is ready to hear some music. What will you sing for us today?
Sabor a mí, of course, but in a twin language, English, Zapotec, and Spanish.
That's wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, Sabor a mí by Álvaro Carrillo, sung by Mario Carrillo.
Tanto tiempo disfrutamos este amor, nuestras almas se acercaron, tanto así que yo guardo tu sabor, pero tú llevas también sabor a mí. Si negaras mi presencia en tu vivir, bastaría con abrazarte y conversar. Tanta vida yo te di, que por fuerza llevas ya sabor a mí. Kadirave, Gakustine, Irutinaka, Kadikuchayendanaro, Shkendanavane, Kudienirisaka, Naendasi Shirundi, Sandaudie, Sadidi Staleisa, Stalepe, que gana Paluendaguti, Sanashe, Neraibaka Sirari, Danirualu Masineu, Nishestine. For so long we both enjoyed this great love, and our souls became so close that I still have the taste of you, but you also carry through the taste of me. If you will deny my presence in your life, all I do is hold you tight, and we would talk so much joy from me to you, that no matter what you do, you have the taste of me. I would never pretend to own you. I am nothing and I have no vanity. Of my life I give the best. I'm supporters, nothing else for me to give. 1,000 years will soon go by, and many more. I don't know if in eternity there is love, but out there as well as here, on your lips there'll always be sabor, sabor a mí, sabor a mí.
Who's moving the chessmen? What interests and motivate the actors behind each event? The board is deployed there. Critical Move investigates every event from Monday to Friday. Only on TeleSUR.
In a world infested by inequalities, abuse of power, and injustice, the American journalist Abby Martin covers the struggle for fundamental rights worldwide, deepening into the search of files which uncover the empire's strategies through our screen and web platform in English. The Empire Files with Abby Martin. Tuesday, only on TeleSUR. Follow the most important global events through a comprehensive perspective. With a team of journalists in 25 locations around the world to convey our people's reality. From the South. Weekdays. Only on TeleSUR.
Aquí estoy frente a los muros, libre de hablar realidades, de celebrar mis conjuros, de cantar nuestras verdades. Vengo de todas las madres con hijos nunca encontrados. Soy el sueño de mi padre, el de un continente alzado. Yo vine a mostrar los rostros, a nombrarme en tus palabras, para sabernos nosotros, para que el camino abra. A decir lo necesario, de pie junto a mis hermanos, señalar a los contrarios, alzando en puños las manos. Celebro la justa hora de no bajar la mirada, de buscar allí en la aurora nuestra historia liberada. TeleSUR, 15 años al aire, libres.
为了保持身体健康，我冥想。
Para mantenerme saludable, yo corro.
To keep myself healthy, I study.
Για να διατηρηθώ υγιής, τρέφομαι σωστά.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo bailo.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo purifico mi espíritu a través del cuerpo. ¿Y tú?
Get Your Body. Tuesdays, only on TeleSUR.
Innovation, science, the technological breakthrough and its influence in society.
Viajeros del saber, el futuro está aquí.
Atomy. Monday, only on TeleSUR.
The Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transform the world today. Mondays, only on TeleSUR. A review of the world news that investigates, incites analysis and induces criticism, because every event has a context.
Pusimos el punto en ahí.
Dot in the eye. Saturdays, only on TeleSUR.
Follow our program minute by minute. Our signal in audio format is now also available on our website. Get the latest updated facts and news emerging around the world from a Latin American reliable angle. TeleSUR, connecting the global south.
Acompañamos a los pueblos que resisten en cada una de sus luchas.
Somos esa ventana que se abre para visibilizarlos entre fronteras.
Thursdays, only on TeleSUR.
We share your feelings, exalt your accomplishments, and show your reality. Our approach is global and keeps us in tune with the peoples. Caribbean countries also get our signal. With enthusiasm, we will continue to broadcast for them. Because we are TeleSUR, the news broadcaster from South America and the Caribbean.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Sean todos muy bienvenidos a Vidas.
lugares donde el arte se unifica con el orgullo de los pueblos. Y esos lugares están llenos de colores, alegría, pasión, tradiciones, arraigo, valor y entrega.
Real Life. Fridays. Only on TeleSUR. Who's moving the chessmen? What interests and motivate the actors behind each event? The board is deployed there. Critical Move investigates every event from Monday to Friday. Only on TeleSUR.
Una travesía para descubrirnos. Buscamos conexiones perdidas.
No nos queda otra que luchar, porque no tenemos nada que perder.
Realmente es por todos.
Recorremos el mundo con Reportajes TeleSUR.
The life is full of moments. Moments of fight. Moments of hope. Moments that transcend. Moments that you can live in. TeleSUR documentaries. Sundays. Only on TeleSUR.
Yet another shooting massacre of 17 students in Parkland, Florida has brought the issue of corporate lobbying back into public consciousness, with outrage over the National Rifle Association's power and influence over politicians. According to Open Secrets in 2017, the total amount spent on lobbying Congress was $3 billion, with 11,444 registered lobbyists on the Hill. That's 26 lobbyists for every elected representative. The top spender was Big Pharma at nearly $300 million, followed by industries such as oil and gas, telecommunications, weapons and war, and big banks. Experts suggest that the real amount spent on lobbying is really 3 times higher than being disclosed, and the true amount of lobbyists closer to 100,000. But reforms that most Americans believe help combat the system of pay-to-play politics have instead been weaponized against them. Congressional researcher James D'Angelo has a theory based on years of mining through data that the Legislative Reorganization Act of 1970, which opened up politicians' voting records, has only helped special interests and corporations, not the people. I sat down with James to talk about how corporate lobbyists exploit transparency laws, which are thought to make the US system more democratic. So before we get into how transparency has been weaponized, let's talk about how things used to be before 1970. Let's talk about how the president voted, how Congress functioned.
Right, so it's actually a very interesting time. I mean, most people look back at the early 70s as a time of turmoil. There's Vietnam, there's lots of civil rights questions, but mathematically there's some very interesting things. We are talking the least partisan Congress in American history. We're talking the lowest levels of income inequality in American history. So the rich and the poor are closer than at any time in US history and some of the lowest in world history. Campaign finances, zero or next to zero. Certainly if we're talking Congress, presidents always had some campaign finance issues going back to the Roosevelts, et cetera. But for a member of Congress, they're not receiving money to run for Congress in 1970. Throughout history, there have been about 200 floor votes a year. So if you saw the Lincoln movie, that's actually, the entire movie is about a floor vote, which is the final vote. And that vote has always been public. All the committees, however, and all the discussions and in the hearings, all of those votes, so John F. Kennedy, when he was a senator, all those votes were secret. We don't have any record of Kennedy voting in committee. And those votes are upwards of thousands per year. And that's when all the most sensitive work gets done. So there's very few political scholars that would reject the idea that committees are where the work gets done. That's where everything gets done. And then the floor vote is considered, as said by many, the show vote. So you basically already know how you're going to vote. So if you're talking about eliminating special interests, if you're talking about taking on a corporation or et cetera, you're going to do that in committee, where the votes have always been secret, dating straight back to the Constitution, the writing of the Constitution, and even before.
And in 1970, there was something called the Legislative Reorganization Act that fundamentally Congress functioned in our entire government.
History. There's one in 1946, which scholars have written endlessly on, and then there's one in 1970. And think about the name of that. Legislative means law or lawmaking. Reorganization is we're going to change it. Act means it's no longer a bill, it was passed into law. So we are going to change how Congress works. Notably, again, this is a very important time to change Congress because we're talking about a time when inequality has been dropping for years, incarceration rates have been dropping, and there's no finance spending. And then we change it, and we have this explosion of changes with how Congress is responding to corporate power, et cetera. The law states a number of things, the most important of which is it says all committees must publish their votes. If you're a lobbyist in 1969, we know exactly where you are. You're in the lobby. Your name fits who you are. If you're a lobbyist after this act, especially by 73 and 75 when they underline this act, you're sitting in the committee. Now they've opened up these tables and you've got all the lobbyists and all the journalists here, and you're lucky if you've got a couple constituents in these rooms. So if you're talking about Armed Service Committee, Ways and Means Committees, these are all $1,000 per hour lobbyists sitting there as they're now facing them.
It seems like such an honorable initiative. Let's open up Congress. Let's make all the votes public. Let's finally hold these people accountable. Obviously, we know where it went, but what entities were even pushing for this to happen? And was it did it have good intentions initially?
Right, so it's always hard to know what's in the hearts of men and who was pushing for it behind the scenes. And the thing, these acts passed overwhelmingly, so 192 to 6. But we do know certain organizations pushed heavily for this. One is the AFL-CIO was involved. They were excited. They were a very liberal group, and most of the groups that were outwardly pushing for transparency were very liberal, pushing for more civil rights laws or more union protections, et cetera. And they wanted to make sure that the legislation they were pushing for was passing. The main person pushing for this is a guy named Richard Conlin. Richard Conlin was also a lobbyist. But he knew almost all the congressmen. He was called the 436th member of Congress by a lot of people. And so we would meet him in the elevators, and he would talk to them all about the provisions he was trying to pass, and they would say, oh, we're definitely supporting you, we're definitely supporting you. They'd walk into the committee, then the bill would fail. Mm-hmm. And he'd go, but I counted, 60% of my, the votes were going to come my way. But the votes were flipping on him inside of committee, and so he was very furious about this. And that's exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to pressure from the outside, as a lobbyist, the way members vote. So these are the two main groups. We don't have civic groups running around with banners, we want more transparency. And certainly at that time, if you look up in what Google, whatever it is that measures word usage, transparency is barely even used, accountability is barely even used. Those things have risen in the 70s and 80s, and some people have suggested they've been initiatives pushed by corporations that were kicked outside of committees. And so these groups that weren't making it in committees were some of the initial transparency proponents.
And so many horrifying trends have taken place since 1970, James, that you outline. I mean, just go over some of them.
Taxes on the wealthy, up until 1976, the marginal tax rate, so there's effective tax rates, so not statutory tax rates, but what the rich are actually paying, are around 74%. So the wealthy are paying 74%, and it's been high for many years. It certainly went up with World War II. As soon as they open the Ways and Means Conference committees and the finance committees, which are the committees where the Senate and the House resolve their differences, they open those at the end of 75. As soon as they open in 76, the taxes on the wealthy plummet. Boom. In 3 years, it goes down 50%, and it's been flat ever since. And so this is what we see. Right? As soon as particular committees get open, the legislation immediately benefits whatever special interests. As we know, the US government was actually on the forefront of environmental legislation. So in the 60s and right up into 71, we were passing very strong environmental bills.
People don't like to hear that Nixon is who created the EPA.
Right, exactly. And Congress is very much in support of this, and we were just doing the most foundational work on the environment, and we were pissing off corporations. They were just furious at this. And then we start to soften. As soon as those doors are open, corporations, oil companies, coal companies, who knows what, automotive companies, are coming into these committees, and all the legislation is softening.
And this is, income inequality skyrocketing, the amount of lobbyists skyrocketing, the amount of money that lobbyists are putting in the system. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. The vast majority of Americans support Medicare for all, or some sort of federally funded healthcare system. The vast majority of Americans support net neutrality. The vast majority of Americans oppose cutting Social Security up to 90%. I mean, the list goes on with that. And these are obviously big examples, right? Yet we see our politicians doing the opposite of every single thing that the will of the people put forward. And there's actually a study that proves this, that shows that in every example of the people's will, it doesn't matter because it's not up to the people, James. Can you talk about what this study is and what it shows?
So you've got Martin Gillen's Benjamin Page come out in 2014. They get, it's an elaborate and beautiful study. They gathered tons of data. I think going back to the 50s, they haven't released their work on the older data. But the recent data shows that if the vast majority of Americans support a policy proposal, or if the vast majority of Americans dislike a policy proposal, that policy proposal has the exact same chance of passing. So what it says is if Americans really like it, or if they really hate it, it's still got about a 30% chance of passing. And the opposite is true if we look at elites or special interests. So if elites or special interests really hate a policy proposal, it's really unlikely that proposal is going to pass. And if they really like it, it gets up to about 60% that it's going to pass. So what it's basically saying is it's easier to kill legislation than it is to pass it, but it's also saying that elites have they find much more response to their policy suggestions or policy preferences than the vast majority of Americans. Interestingly, though, this is something that I looked at a while ago and presented in my research. I would say that Gillen's and Page's data probably doesn't change over time. So I don't suspect that this is something that changes in 1970. I suspect that we're going to see those numbers be pretty flat right through the 50s. And if we're talking about a policy proposal that Americans are knowledgeable of, those are actually the policy proposals that lobbyists don't do a lot of work on. It's as soon as and believe me, they're polling as well. So lobbyists are very aware when citizens don't know about a tax reform piece or something that's going to change taxation. As soon as it's not in the public sight, that's where you're going to see the most lobbyists on. And there's been congressmen who have said this. So the least amount of public attention, the more lobbyists you get. All right, and we're talking the American public's only going to know about 4 or 5 policy changes per year. And so when we're doing thousands upon thousands, the lobbyists are going to attack all of those. And we've had the tax reform in '86, and we just had the recent one in, was it 2017? In between those two, there's been over 20,000 changes to our tax code. None of that gets covered in the newspaper. None of that's going to make the big press. But the lobbyists are there on all of those. And the pressures that politicians feel are going to be on all of those, but only from the wealthy or the big groups that have a lot of power.
And it makes perfect sense why these numbers have remained static, because it's not saying how it changed with transparency or the weaponization of transparency. This is just saying this is the system that we have. We don't live in a democracy. We live in an oligarchy. Here's the data that proves this. So what the Transparency Initiative has done is just simply weaponize that system. I mean, it's made us think that we are free.
I think what it says more than anything is that Americans mostly don't know most of the policies. And even when they know something, I don't think they're very familiar with the ins and outs of it. So if you talk about the Dodd-Frank, you know, go talk to people about the Dodd-Frank legislation on the street, and they're going to be like, oh yeah, they did something to the banks, right? I'm for it. And they're not going to know anything about the thousands of lines in there. The elites who are going to be affected by Dodd-Frank, of course, are going to know a lot more about it. And so we'd love to think that the American public is following legislation and they're understanding legislation. We just don't see that at all. We'd love to think that lobbyists aren't following legislation and they aren't the ones benefiting transparency, but that's precisely what we see.
With the initiation of transparency has made people more placated into thinking that they have more power over time.
Correct, absolutely. So with 200 floor votes a year, we don't find any citizens following the 200 floor votes. So already back in the 60s, they were talking about how little people followed votes. So even congressional scholars will tell you they don't follow 200 votes a year. They don't even follow 40 votes a year. Likely you don't follow 40 votes a year. I've never met anyone who follows 40 votes a year. They increased that number in 1970 to thousands of votes per year. You're talking millions and millions of pages just of hearings and legislation just to decipher one vote.
And let's talk about bills, because you made an obvious but very astute point. I mean, the Bill of Rights was how many pages?
Right. The Bill of Rights, the one that I have, fits on one page.
So, I mean, the bills today are stunningly enormous. I mean, thousands of pages, a lot of them are written directly by these lobbyists. And how does that fit into the special interest versus constituent? Like, let's say I want to be engaged politically.
Even back in the 70s, I would say it's impossible to follow legislation as a constituent. So you really have to trust your legislator. And your legislator can't follow all legislation. So what they're going to do is if they're going to read something back in the 70s and they don't understand it, guess how they're going to vote? Hell no. Because I've got no pressures to vote on something stupid, right? I can't read it. It makes no sense to me. No one knocked on my door and talked to me about it. I'm not going to vote for it. Now, if I hand you something that's 1,000 pages back in 1970, you're just going to be like, give me a break. I didn't even have time to read it. How am I going to vote for this? But as soon as you can watch how people vote, and as soon as my pressure is, say, you're a Republican and I'm a Democrat, and I see all the Republicans voting for it, if I vote for it, I might get called out by my press anyways. Right? Oh, he's siding with the Republicans. I don't even have to read it. I almost immediately, knee-jerk reaction, I have to vote against what you guys are voting. So we get this immediate partisanship. But I've also got pressures from the lobbyists to vote for it. And therefore you could get legislation through that no one understands. And when I say no one but the particular special interest. So complexity rises, page length rises, the bigger the bill is, the easier it is to insert these lines that'll make everyone fall asleep.
Yeah, constituents are busy figuring out how does this affect me, what does it disadvantage my community, these thousands of pages, the special interest says, boom, this is
right.
for or
Insert
against
this
me.
obscure paragraph. So again, if the citizens can't understand it, boy, they stand a great chance. If people can understand it, well, it gets a little tougher.
The National Rifle Association, the lobbying arm of the gun manufacturing industry, is in the spotlight for its influence in Washington in the midst of an epidemic of mass shootings. The NRA's investments to defeat gun reform, which is favored by most Americans, reached $84 million in the 2016 election alone. Right-wing Florida Senator Marco Rubio was personally confronted by survivors of the Parkland school massacre about his gifts from the NRA.
So, Senator Rubio, can you tell me right now that you will not accept a single donation from the NRA in the future?
No, the answer to the question is that people buy into my agenda. And I do support the Second Amendment. And I also support the right of you and everyone here to be able to go to school and be safe. And that's why I support the things that I have stood for and fought for during my time there.
NRA money? More NRA money?
The influence of these groups comes not from money. The influence comes from the millions of people that agree with the agenda. Our goal here is to move forward.
Wait, so hold on. So right now, in the name of 17 people, you cannot ask the NRA to keep their money out of your campaign?
I think in the name of 17 people, I can pledge to you that I will support any law that will prevent a killer like this.
No, but I'm talking NRA money.
No.
But how lobbyists influence politicians is not always as clear and direct. In Marco Rubio's case, he's only received about $5,000 in direct contributions from the NRA. But they spent over $1 million on his re-election campaign. They also use different forms of intimidation against pro-gun reform politicians. James D'Angelo further explains how these lobbying strategies work. So surely it comes down to just electing the uncorruptible, right?
No. We don't find much evidence that they're corrupt. The way money's used, and this is all the dark money, most of the public money, and almost all of the campaign financing is used to intimidate. Almost all of the dark money is used for advertising. And almost all the advertising is negative advertising. And so if Abby, for example, starts voting against my initiatives, we're going to start taking out negative advertising against her. Now, if you don't change your views, that actually doesn't bother us that much. It terrifies everybody else who might be voting. But if we do that on a fairly consistent basis, and the NRA does that on a fairly consistent basis, everybody knows that if they vote against the NRA, they're going to find tons of ads in their district. And the ads aren't going to be about guns. They're going to be on whatever would take this person out. So when Joe Manchin stepped up against the NRA, when the approval rating for tougher gun laws in the US was over 90%, when he proposed some soft gun legislation, the NRA started taking out millions of dollars of ads against him. None of the ads were about guns.
I mean, I guess it's going out on a limb to say that these people are not corrupted, because let's say, just best case scenario, everyone's joining the legislative body wanting to do good. At a certain point, they know that to keep that position, they have to keep taking the money from their corporate donors because I mean, that's the sheer cost of running and maintaining your position in government. So I don't see how the bribery isn't a thing.
It's much easier for me to start funding this guy over here who's got a long history for voting for the tobacco companies, and fund him and then try and take you out with a ton of negative ads and go after you on every level possible. And it's much cheaper than bribery. Because if I pay you for a vote today, are you going to ask for more money tomorrow? Of course you will. But if I get someone who's always voted for some lunatic policy that I like, and I get them in office, I'm not going to have to pay them each time.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, just today we have the sheer amount of spending on campaigns has skyrocketed so much just over the last 10 years, where you have the Democratic Party actually making candidates do Rolodex tests, where you have to prove that you can raise $250,000 through the contacts on your phone in order to even be backed by the party institution.
Right.
So I guess what I'm saying is, it almost seems like self-sabotage, because all of the people in their Rolodexes are obviously going to be tied to the special interest, to the corporation. So it's almost like you're shooting yourself in the foot before you even get into office.
It could be. I mean, we certainly could expect some of that. Intimidation's baked in. But if you look at Lawrence Lessig or Zephyr Teachout, who are talking about corruption, in both of their books, full books on corruption, they don't mention intimidation. It's all bribery. Humans are great at intimidation. You vote with me on this, or we talk later. That's legal, right? And everybody knows what that means. Or the NRA, after taking Deborah Maggart out in Tennessee or going after Joe Manchin, doesn't say anything. They just tell you they're watching your votes. That's all they say. That's legal, right? And if they tell you they're watching your votes, what does that mean? It means if you vote against them, you're going to have in your district, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars of ads against you. Intimidation is the currency of the realm. Bribery is its orphan stepsister.
Lastly, I mean, in a system where people truly did have the power, that they were able to democratize themselves and actually hold power to account, let's say not living in an oligarchy where corporations control everything, not living in this kind of inevitability of capitalism where we see where we are today, wouldn't transparency work then if we actually could function as the democracy that we are all conditioned to believe?
A liquid democracy where everybody's voting on everything? I mean, the Greeks tried that. It's pretty hazardous, right? California is very good at trying that. We do a lot of referendums here in California, right?
I hear what you're saying. I just think that we've gotten to a point today where I don't think closing off transparency in the legislature is the end-all be-all of the solution. I think that there's a bigger system at play, which is global capitalism. And
I think you're right. I mean, I think this isn't the answer to everything. This doesn't solve everything. In fact, what I'm doing in Uganda right now is because this doesn't solve everything, what am I looking at? And I actually look at, there's one thing, it's shocking that no one's measured this, but we're trying to measure this. And we're trying to measure just the median net worth of legislators. The median net worth compared to the median net worth of the citizens. And those numbers are always different, right? So the median net worth of the legislators in most developing countries is going to be 1,000 times higher than the median net worth of citizens. This is not a transparency or, you know, legislative transparency issue. This is we're electing the elites, and somehow the elites are getting into office, and we're not even measuring that. And we suspect that just by measuring it, we're going to change how we talk about democracy, right? The fact that we don't know these numbers in Canada, we don't know them in Brazil, we don't know it in Mexico, France, Sweden, Spain, none of these countries, we have these numbers. But in many of these developing countries, the difference is over 1,000, we suspect, and the legislatures are completely made up of the richest people in the country. Well, I can tell you exactly how the legislation is going to go if you get that. This isn't a transparency legislative issue. We're electing aristocrats.